Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Joining us as always, the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com, Andrew Malcolm at AH Malcolm on Twitter, not X, but Twitter.
Yeah, it will always be Twitter in our hearts.
It's gonna be Twitter, man. I'm a grouchy old man. Don't make me change. Don't make me change stuff like that.
Well, you know what if you say to somebody, "I'm going to X today," they start thinking sex tapes. You know, and they don't know. So it's much safer to say, "I'm going to tweet."
We should sell this. Should sell this as X-rated.
That's right.
I can't even imagine people tuning in to see us doing X-rated, let alone the disappointment that they're going to, well, maybe it's not going to be disappointing. Maybe it's disappointing. They might be, it might be more like relief that we're just talking about Twitter. Oh, goodness. Oh, well, that went south fast. All right. So let's get back to what's happening in the world, man. You got some great stuff up at redstate.com. We're going to get to that in a second because the Joe Biden stuff today is 9/11 as we're recording this. And Joe Biden's nowhere to be found. And prior to getting that, though, I do want to talk about what's happening in New Mexico because I'm really exercised about this. You have the governor there, Michelle Luhan Grisham, deciding that she's going to declare a gun safety emergency in Albuquerque, and it's a county in which Albuquerque sits. And I forget, I think it's Bernalillo County. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's Bernalillo County, and so that the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms outside your house has been suspended by order of Michelle Luhan Grisham. I don't even know how she came up with the idea that governors have the authority to suspend the federal constitution. I don't even think that they have the authority to suspend the state constitution without the legislature participating in it, even if there's an authority to do it at all. It'd have to come from the legislature. I mean, there's already lawsuits up against this, but I mean, this is a grotesque abuse of power. This is exactly what a lot of people are complaining about with the COVID emergency decree, which is declaring emergencies in order to impose dictatorial edicts on what is supposed to be a constitutionally run republic. And I'm amazed that she thought she could get away with this. I'm amazed that she's still defending it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't recall any governor doing this in the past. I don't think any governor previous to this would have even thought to try something like this. It is stunning. It's absolutely stunning. And, you know, the media is not covering a lot of it except to say, well, you know, she's taking efforts to, you know, to curtail gun violence. It's nonsense. She is turning law-abiding Americans into criminals for exercising their civil rights.
Yeah. Well, it's got to be important if you're exercised because you're a very mellow fellow. But I don't know that she has the authority either. I remember in the 60s during the urban riots, there was martial law in the cities, and I guess that would suspend some constitutional rights, and you would have to be in your house, or there were curfews and all of that. But this is just beyond the pale. It's just amazing. Is the election next year?
I believe her election was last year.
Oh, okay. Well, then
I think New Mexico. I could be wrong about that. I'll double check that, Andrew. And I should have thought to look that up. But if she's coming up for election next year, and this is her second term, so it's possible that there's a term limit too for.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, then that would make it okay, right? Because what are they going to do to her? They're going to make her lease the car instead of buy it.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah, it's. You're right. These things, I don't know that the entire country's democracy is under threat, but there are threats around the edge and in the middle sometimes that are just beyond the pale. That it's almost like they're looking for a fight of some kind. And that's why I asked about the election, because you think, well, is this something you want to have a fight about? And if she was facing an election, it might be if there was a significant woke group in New Mexico. I can't imagine, but it's been voting pretty Democrat recently.
Well, the state legislature is dominated by the Democrats, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
look, it's almost 2-1. It's almost veto proof. It's not quite in either chamber, but it's very, very close. It's like within a seat of having veto proof supermajorities in both of these. By the way, the last gubernatorial election was last year, so she's got 3+ years to go
yeah,
on this
yeah.
term. So I'm not sure if there is a term limit. It doesn't appear that there is a term limit. I take it back. I see where it says that now. 2 consecutive terms. So she'd have to sit out for at least a term if she wanted to run for a 3rd term as governor. So she's not running for re-election next time out, regardless. But I mean, this is, I wrote a lengthy piece today, a somewhat passionate piece, that impeachment exists to deal with things like bribery, with corruption, with criminal malfeasance in office. But really, the impeachment power exists in both the federal and state constitutions, primarily to eject an executive that turns into a tyrant, to remove a president that has decided to accrue, or governor that has decided to accrue all of the power in his or her own hands and rule outside the Constitution and outside the boundaries of the law. And that's exactly what Grisham's doing, and Lujan Grisham is doing here. This is the reason why we have impeachment, is to stop people from saying, I am suspending the Constitution, or I am suspending the rule of law.
But imposing it with that much of a almost super majority, it makes it unreal. You know? I mean, it's the same thing for Biden. People calling, "Oh, we got to impeach Biden." Well, no, you're not. You're not going to get, what is it, 60 in the Senate?
67. You need 67. Actually, it's a 2/3. It's not just the filibuster. It's
so it becomes one of these phony kabuki play things that they're always doing in Washington, and then they don't understand why their job approval is so low. I don't think they care, because they keep getting elected anyway. But it's pathetic, these little plays and charades that they put on. Like a Senate hearing. Have you ever watched any of those on C-SPAN? They're not hearings. They're not even listenings. Both sides come in with a script, and the witness reads something that he wrote a week ago, or someone wrote for him, and he reads it, and then the questions are all, well, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the time. I'm going to spend my 15 minutes, and he just goes on and on and on.
Yeah,
with a pre-written script. It's so formulaic, and there's no substance to it. Nobody's listening. Nobody's responding really. It's just so frustrating. I worked in Washington for brief periods of months, a couple of times, but I resisted assignments there forever, because it's just such a phony. Well, swamp is overused, but it is a swamp.
Yep. All right, let's take a look at what's going on with Joe Biden, right? Because we, it's difficult to find Joe Biden actually at the moment.
Well, where's Waldo? Yeah,
where's Dumbo? I think is more what's going on here. Did you see? I believe this was in Vietnam. It could have been. It was yesterday or day before yesterday, where Karine Jean-Pierre actually had to basically call an end to a press conference in the middle of Joe Biden's answer.
Yeah.
That's it. We're done.
Yeah. But he was rambling and lost. And, it's strange, because he's not consistently incoherent. It comes on and off. So, like some of the things that he says, we was talking, I forget what it was. I just read it before we started the show. And it was, he made a lot of sense. from his point of view, not mine, but a
Right.
lot of sense.
It was
And then,
coherent, in other words. It wasn't
yeah,
necessarily, I
yeah,
didn't agree with it, but it was at least coherent.
coherent and argue, and it was a fairly solid argument. And then he goes off and talking about pony soldiers, and I mean, it's just
Yeah, I saw that clip too.
and
He's trying to,
and nobody does anything. Nobody except the right media. We all write about it, and it's kind of like, wow, how can this happen? And then he'll just do it again. It's the polls. If the polls mattered, they show that, what is it, 3/4 think he's too old and not up to another term, and but
yeah, I mean, if you count
but,
just the Democrats in that latest CNN poll, it's
yeah,
70% think that he's
yeah,
not to the
yeah.
job. Yeah.
Well, what are we going to do for the next 14 or 16 months? Jeepers creepers, if there's a crisis, these guys can take him to the cleaners. Uh, what when
Well,
he's
all I can say, Andrew, is repeat after me: President Kamala Harris.
yeah, well, that's it. I don't think he's smart enough to think of that, but maybe somebody else was. But for him to, that is a kind of an impeachment belt,
Well,
or not,
it's a,
Kevlar vest.
yeah, I mean, it's a protection against the 25th Amendment, right? Because Kamala Harris is, I mean, I could put this differently and perhaps more accurately by saying you have to repeat this. President Kamala Harris in charge of presidentialing.
Yeah.
I mean, President Word Salad. The yeah, the specter of it just shocks you into hoping that you can weekend at Bernie's this presidency all the way to 2025.
I know, but in foreign affairs,
Yeah.
if there's a crisis.
Well, now you know
Well,
why he go to the ASEAN conference. They didn't want him there
yeah,
because he couldn't handle it.
yeah. And well, he went to the G20, and he's just so lost. And I mean, that's disgusting. It's scary, and it's disgusting. But what's amazing is that the drumbeat for, geez, we have to do something. Get this guy tested, get this guy, and he's flying back. So the cover for not doing anything on 9/11 was that he spoke to troops and first responders in Alaska during a quickie refueling stop. Yeah, okay, fine.
Yeah.
That is the United States. But this guy, and then he's taking Tuesday off. He's taking the day after the trip off, which tells you, he's not really up to it. Yeah, right. Can you imagine Trump getting 5 hours of sleep and then jumping up and doing 3 rallies in 3 states? I mean, so Biden is taking Tuesday off, and he's going to do something on Wednesday, fundraiser, and some setup meeting in Washington. And then I think he's leaving town again on Thursday, late Thursday or early Friday, for another weekend at Joey's in Delaware. You wonder what are they doing? What do they do to him that he can't have it done in the White House, that some people would see, the servants would see, or there'd be a leak? Because they don't put out the logs from his house.
No.
In Delaware, so we don't know what doctor or what medical team or what one of Hunter's friends brings over some medicines. It's and yet the mainstream media is just like, they don't even comment on it. I can't imagine. I saw examples when I was up until 93, when I was on the New York Times. I saw some examples of that kind of blindness, but it was blindness to what's the word? Blatant portrayal of liberal sympathies. And we had this sounds so ridiculous. We had a really violin strung story about a drug dealer, an 18 or 19-year-old kid in the projects. I think it was in the Bronx. And he was doing drugs and making a fortune. And, some deal went bad and he got killed. And they went and talked to his mother. And his mother said, well, she couldn't believe he was a drug dealer. The guy's bringing her home $1,000 or $2,000 cash every few days. And the picture in the Times is her sitting there with a stereo TV setup on the shelves behind her that I couldn't afford if I got a mortgage on it. I mean, it was a huge stereo system.
Yeah.
And no, she didn't think anything. And so you say, if I was the editor, I'd say, well, wait a minute. First of all, I don't think we can use this picture. But second of all, did you ask her when she had the funds to buy this amazing stereo of it that nothing for her high school dropout son, and nothing sounded funny? So, but
You're
this
not
is
allowed to
all.
ask those questions. You're not allowed to ask those questions, Andrew.
Yeah. No, you're not allowed to ask questions if it's making life better for you. So, anyway, and I raised that with an editor, not the editor, and it was like, oh well, I wasn't known that story. Okay. So, in other words, I was just an eyewitness to the holdup. It just makes me so sad for the media to relinquish its constitutional duty.
Well, yeah. Although I do have to say, I will give credit to I can't remember who it was that was interviewing Kamala Harris. Yesterday as we're recording, Sunday, about abortion. Did you see this clip? Because it's been floating around. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah, that wasn't it Jonathan Karl on ABC, I think.
Oh, I thought
it was NBC. Maybe it was NBC. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Could have been. Yeah, maybe it was Chuck. It could have been Chuck Todd. He just is leaving. At any rate, she's being interviewed and saying, nobody is arguing for unrestricted abortion through all 9 months up to the moment of birth. And she gets asked, so what restrictions, what date of gestation would you support restrictions on? Oh, well, between a woman and her doctor, blah, blah, blah. And the interviewer, and I apologize for not having this up front in mind. It just came to me, came back around to the same question saying, so, okay. Yeah. But if you don't think that, people should have abortions up to the moment of birth, when do you propose to have a restriction? And I was stunned. Maybe that's the reason why I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, you were stunned that there was a follow-up. Yeah.
That they're actually asking this, right? Which is something that they should have been asking all along. The media's been trying to paint Republicans as extremists, but they usually refuse to actually go down this road, which is to say, put Democrats on the spot as to what they mean by, nobody wants to have late-term abortions. Okay, if that's the case, shouldn't be too difficult to restrict it. So
what are you talking? What do you hear?
Yeah.
What's word on the street? Yeah,
exactly right. Yeah, what's the word on the street?
You remember in the Starsky and Hutch shows, they were always going to the shoe shine guy and saying, but they were serious.
Huggy Bear.
What's Huggy Bear? Oh yeah, what's word on the street?
What's the word on the street?
I have to. Excuse me. I have to admit that I have used that at some family gatherings when they ask some question. I say, "Well, word on the street is as if I'm hanging out down in the hood."
Yeah, I usually say something like, word around the campfire is. Antonio Vargas, by the way, played Huggy Bear on Starsky and Hutch. For those who are too young to remember Starsky and Hutch. And to you, I say, get off my damn lawn. Turn down your radio.
Yeah, that's right.
Uh,
That's right.
um, I want to get to another thing that you wrote that's up in the VIP section here. And I'm just going to move over to it really quickly here. This is your Malcolm on the right. Beware of media pundits professing fake fears on the GOP race. Now,
Yeah.
I love this because, and you and I have talked about this, of people trying to say that polling in August is somehow fully predictive of voter behavior 5 months out. And it's simply not true. People don't have to make a decision right now, so they're sticking with their priors.
Right.
And I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that Donald Trump isn't still, the odds-on favorite. It doesn't necessarily mean that Ron DeSantis is going to be the runner-up to this thing or in contention. But it does mean that maybe you should wait until we get closer to actual votes before.
Yeah. Well, it's just extrapolating and working out into the future. You remember the Pew Center or Research Center back in after the 2016 cycle, they went back and interviewed Republicans, and they found that virtually every Republican they talked to at various points in the cycle had changed their mind about who they supported at least once, most of them at least twice, and some 3 and 4 times had changed their minds. So to talk about in September, oh wow, this looks pretty predictive. No, it's not. It's not.
Yeah,
Otherwise we would have President Newt Gingrich and Mitt Romney
and Herman Cain.
That's right, Herman Cain. Oh, you remember his cabinet? He had the best cabinet. And Dick Gephardt. I remember him.
Yeah, Dick Gephardt was a really interesting presidency, but Herman Cain, the whole pizza scandal that turned out because Godfather Pizza put pineapple on its pizza, that almost derailed the presidency of Herman Cain. I remember that. Well, actually, I loved Herman Cain. Herman Cain was a great guy. It was so much fun to interview Herman Cain, and he was just sort of a fun, he's a sort of a fun personality. But I mean, I didn't think Herman Cain was going to necessarily go anywhere, but he was certainly making it enjoyable. And at one point.
And that's what these debates are. They're entertainment. They're not testing or looking into any of the qualities that a president would need, that a good president would need to call on. They're not. It's a reality show, and people watch it to see who's going to screw up and who's going to hand out a zinger. And they're still talking about Tulsi Gabbard's zingers on Kamala, and what was his name? Benson zinger on
Lloyd Benson and Dan Quayle. Yeah,
and Ronald Reagan zinger. I think I mentioned this before on the show, but years later, Walter Mondale told me, well, if you look at the video when Reagan zinged him with "I'm not going to hold my opponent's youth against him," you see Mondale smiling and laughing with the audience, but he said he knew at that moment he was doomed to lose.
And by the way, I'm sure Dan Quayle knew that he was doomed to lose that debate when Lloyd Benson unloaded on him.
Yeah.
But did it change the outcome of the election? No, because people don't vote for vice presidents.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, boom. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Dan Quayle ended up being vice president anyway, so he had the last laugh. But the idea that you're going to have some sort of predictive vision of this in August, especially in this particular instance, because there are so many other variables now in this. What's going to happen in the courts, for better or worse for Trump, because so far it's been for the better, right? It keeps him in the news. It makes him into more of a victim. It is solidifying his traditional base support, which is good for him. It may not be good for him in a general election, but it's good for him in a primary. And all that's true, but we don't know how that's going to play out over the next few months.
Exactly.
We don't know what's going to happen in a trial. We don't even know if he's going to have enough money to get through to the primaries in order to organize it well, because most of the money that he's raising is going to pay his attorney fees and the attorney fees of some, and I say some, of his co-defendants, not others. Jenna Ellis isn't getting a dime because she's supporting Ron DeSantis. But yeah, yeah, I mean, that's
Oh,
off the topic, but I mean, we
yeah.
just don't know. We don't know. We know what we don't know. This isn't even a what's his name? Don. Don Rumsfeld. It's not even a Rumsfeldian conundrum. It's not that we don't know what we don't know. We know what we don't know, and because we know what we don't know, maybe we should go along with the idea that, hey, maybe we don't know how this is all going to play out yet.
There's an idea.
You get down to
But
Thanksgiving or so, and it starts to clarify itself a little bit, one way or the other.
and the media, I wrote about this on Red State a while back, but there is a collusion. It may be an inadvertent collusion between the media and the candidates, in that the media thinks it needs something new every day. Therefore, the only thing that's really new every day is the polls, and it's not even every day. So they will chew over a new poll for several days, and they forget to say these are just snapshots at the moment. And by the time I'm writing this, I'm sure they've all changed. They don't say that. So, and of course, politicians, I was on a presidential campaign, and politicians know this. So they save things, and they will make an announcement of something new on a day before usually lunchtime or right at lunchtime, to give the TV people time to edit it and get it on the evening news, to give them something new.
Right.
And the reporters are constantly complaining, oh, he said this before. And I said, you know what? He hasn't said it to these people before.
Right.
This is a campaign appearance. This isn't a reporter's appearance. He's not doing this for you, Ron.
Yeah, exactly.
He's doing it for the audience and for the people who will see the video. So yeah, and I'm not sure that that most people understand the game that's going on for things to seem new.
Yeah.
They're not new.
No,
They're packaged in new. It's like regifting Christmas gifts. You know, the fruitcake that you've been giving for.
I knew people who did that too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, I got married in Canada, and in Canada, wedding cakes, for some weird reason, wedding cakes are fruitcakes, the most disgusting food on the planet.
What? I like fruitcake. I can't have
Oh
it anymore.
no, Ed, I'm sorry. I resigned from this show. It's the most disgusting thing. You eat a piece of cake and there's little chewy things inside it. These little worms have gotten into the flour. It's just disgusting. So we went to the hotel. It was a Four Seasons hotel in Toronto, and we had them write on the wedding order, wedding cake for this wedding is birthday cake. Birthday cake. And of course, we cut it for the photographers, and it was fruitcake. I mean, I'm gonna complain about that till I'm not able to complain about anything. It was just so disappointing.
You know, you know what I'm going to get you for Christmas this year?
No, you're not.
A Collins Street Bakery fruitcake, because this is apparently it's actually made not far from where I live in Central Texas, and it's supposed to be the world's best fruitcake. They send it out all over the world.
Yeah.
One of their fruitcake cans, in fact, even made it into The Godfather, the first film, The Godfather.
Oh, really?
When Sonny's on the phone, when he's getting suckered into going out to beat up what's his name? I can't remember his brother-in-law's name, and gets angry. If you look very carefully, because Collins Street Bakery actually likes to highlight this. There is a Collins Street Bakery tin on the counter.
So,
It's exactly the same as it looks today.
so, so it's bad luck to eat their cakes if you're in the mafia.
Oh,
And
well, fine. If you're going to do that, Andrew, come on.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay, all
Oh,
right, okay. I mean,
well, for
I
me,
can't eat it. I can't eat it. It's too
it's
sugary.
Kringle from we get Kringle from Wisconsin. That's the big holiday thing, Thanksgiving, and I get two Thanksgivings that
Yes.
Canadian and which is Columbus Day weekend, and in the States, and Christmas Kringle
Well,
pecan.
brag, 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 brag. One last question before we go to the jokes of the day, though.
Yeah,
Do you think that Biden's going to pay any price at all for not showing up to any of the 9/11
no,
remembrances?
no,
Do you think
no.
that the explanation that shouldn't we stop doing this after 22 years is
Oh,
going to help?
that's terrible.
Wasn't
Oh,
it terrible?
you can't do that. It's like my mother's dead. Why do we celebrate Mother's Day? Well, what? Nobody. Obviously, this must be a young campaign person who said this.
Yeah.
He's got a bunch of young millennials there, and they don't. They were what, 3 years old when their parents were crying in the living room.
Yeah.
No. It's just everything is so depressing, Ed. Why do we bother with anything? In
I don't
fact,
know.
the hell with it. Yeah, let's
The hell with it. Let's get to the jokes of the day then. I don't know.
yeah,
Do you
let's
have any?
lighten things up. I've got a couple for a change.
I
These
got a
are
couple
all
for you
old,
too.
of course. Uh, Jimmy Fallon said Bob Dylan has been asked to be the voice of the new GPS system. Bob Dylan's GPS will be the first designated to get you anywhere except your destination. I like that one.
I like that one too. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then Conan, he said, this week, 2 people in New Jersey were arrested for growing marijuana at home. Police became suspicious when they found something growing in Newark. That is a depressing place, I have
Yeah,
to say.
yeah, yeah. I've heard. I've
Oh,
never been there, but I've heard.
oh, that
All
I
right. Well,
used to had to go there for some stories when I was a new reporter, and that was, oh my God.
yeah, Cory Booker's from there. Can't be all that great, right?
Oh yeah, but they had a Republican mayor years ago. There was a Republican mayor there. I guess he didn't get much done, but one time, Fox Butterfield. I don't know if you remember him, but he
I
was
do.
a reporter. He was on the "You're Going to Be a Reporter" program on the New York Times after me, 2 years after me. And he got in. He was covering Newark, and he got in some trouble, and there were violent threats. So they had a bodyguard uh, assigned to him every time he went into Newark. And if you're part of the news, you can't write about it on the New York Times, or at least in those days. So they assigned me to cover him, covering the news in case anything happened. I've ribbed him about that so much. And fortunately, he put in the bodyguard was like 6'8", like an NFL lineman. It was just
Yeah.
a huge guy. And so I wasn't going to. I told Fox, "Don't worry, I'm not attacking you," because then I'd be part of the story, and I couldn't write.
Well, there you go.
Nothing happened though, so of course it was another wasted day as a junior reporter.
Well, and I'm sure that there were plenty of those days. I got a couple of jokes
Oh,
for you,
there
though.
were. Yeah, please.
All right, here's a couple of jokes from jokesoftheday.net. I got them from here today. First joke is guy's hired to paint lines on a little country road. So the boss gives him a big can of paint, a brush, and sends him out. At the end of the day, when he comes to get paid, he tells the boss he got 2 miles done. The boss is, pretty impressed by that. At the end of the second day, the painter reports that he did a half mile. The boss is a little curious about that, but doesn't say anything. And at the end of the third day, the painter reports he did 400 yards. And the boss says, well, wait a minute. That's quite a bit different than the first day. And the painter says, yeah, well, it's a lot longer walk to get back to the paint can now.
see that one coming. That's good. That's good.
All right. Here's one of those rabbi, minister, priest jokes. Okay, this is I like this one. Rabbi and priest and a minister have their houses of worship side by side, so they decide to carpool. On the first day, the other two are shocked to see the pastor lay hands on the hood and pray silently. "What are you doing?" the priest says. And the minister says, "Well, I'm just dedicating the car to the Lord's service." "A good idea. I'll be right back," the priest says, and goes into the church. He comes back out with a bulb on a short stick and shaking water out onto the car. And the rabbi says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm consecrating it with holy water." "Great idea," the rabbi says. He runs into a synagogue, comes back out with a hacksaw and shaves about an inch off the tailpipe.
That's disgusting.
But
that one hurts.
Yeah, all the guys are doing this, right?
Yeah.
Is it as disgusting as fruitcake, though? That's the.
Well, no, fruitcake is the top. There's except for Brussels sprouts. There's nothing more disgusting than fruitcake. It's just an awful thing. Little things in it. Oh.
All right, let me make a note to self.
Right. Make sure you order that cake. I'm not giving you my address.
Brussels sprouts.
Yeah, right.
All right, I've got the menu down, Andrew, for when you.
Yeah. I might not be able to make it, Ed. Let's stop at the Waffle House beforehand. Yeah,
it's always the Waffle House is always a safe bet. So good.
And it's always open. It's always open. Yeah,
it's always open. All right, Andrew Malcolm, the prince of Twitter, the regent of Red State, fruitcake denier. At AH Malcolm on Twitter. And of course, VIP section at redstate.com. Go there and check it out. Andrew, as always, what a great week. Can't wait to do it again next week.
Okay, buddy. See you, everybody.
This is Ed Morrissey of hotair.com for Town Hall. Governor Michelle Luhan Grisham elevated herself above the U.S. Constitution last week in suspending the Second Amendment in parts of New Mexico. Luhan Grisham had declared a gun violence emergency in Albuquerque and suspended all rights to keep and bear arms outside the home for 30 days. This is an act of tyranny. Governors operate under authority granted by both the federal and state constitutions, not the other way around. Luhan Grisham took an oath to uphold both, but then declared that oath to be not absolute. In doing so, Luhan arrogated all power into her hands and stripped American citizens of their civil rights. Now comes the question, will state legislators follow their oaths to uphold and defend the U.S. Constitution? The only political defense against an executive that seizes such power is impeachment and removal. New Mexico's state legislature is dominated by Democrats. They ought not to circle the wagons around their tyrant. I'm Ed Morrissey.